Don, I missed you, brother, but it's so good to be back, and it's so good interviewing my very good friend Matt. What'd you think, my man?
Man, it was such a pleasure chatting with him. I like, I stuck to my guns and listened like I always do, yeah, really interesting journey, to becoming a therapist, and I find that a lot of the things that he was talking about, even growing up, some of the feelings of being a little bit isolated, and wanting to find relationships, and also being in fear of some of those relationships. Like, I think it's a lot of stuff that everybody can relate with.
Everyone can relate to that stuff. And I think a lot of people also have this notion of like a therapist who has it all together and's got it all figured it out. And that's obviously just not true. And this is a story of a guy who just started out in the profession after working in Starbucks forever. And now he's killing it, and he's found a real passion in what he does. And being someone that I've known since I was 7 and have looked up to, this was a little bit of a dream come true to me. It really was. I love this guy. I love his family. I'm really glad I got to share this with you, Don.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Thanks for bringing Matt on. It was a real pleasure.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my very, very, very long time friend, Matt. Don, I'm back, baby.
Woo! Welcome back, man. It feels nice to have a partner in crime over here.
I gotta say, I didn't have high hopes. But I listened to the episode, and you killed it, brother.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
You held it down. You sounded comfortable. It's like you don't even need little old me anymore.
No, that's not true. I'll always need you by my side, my friend.
I'm always going to be by your side, Don. But if I was ever going to leave your side, it's to join someone else's side.
What?
That's right. Can we introduce the dude I've known longer than anyone we've spoken to on this podcast, anyone here in Hamilton, a dude I have known since I was 7 years old?
Whoa.
That's right. He's known 7-year-old Sam. Maybe we'll get into that. Hopefully not. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my friend, Matt. What's up, Matt?
Hey, guys.
Hey.
Oh, I tried to hit the applause, but of course I messed up on the button. But right now there's a million people silently applauding you. Matt, thank you for joining us, brother.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me on.
So,
I appreciate it.
So I was giving Don the rundown, but I'm going to go ahead and just briefly go over this with our listeners. So, Matt, imagine me, 7 years old, running around with my best friend in the world, Eric, and we are just getting into trouble, but always on the sidelines. There's this older brother. What's he doing? Maybe playing some piano, maybe talking like an adult to someone, which always blew my mind. And I'll never forget the time that it was snowy and it was icy outside. And it was one of the rare times you hung out with us. You took us to fast food. And I'll never forget it because on the way there on this icy road, you were playing a classical tune about a big car wreck.
Really? Was it a class? Oh, I think I know what that is. There's a Beethoven album that I've got, which some guy plays synthesizer Beethoven and reinterprets it in different ways. And one of the songs is a really cool Beethoven song that he kind of makes it come out sounding like, you've got these cars approaching a train tracks, and then you hear the train coming, and then at the very end they crash into the train as they're trying to get past the tracks.
Yeah, man.
I bet you that was it.
Yeah, and you never know what you're going to remember for the rest of your life. And that was one of those moments where I was just like, this is so freaking cool. I'm in this car with Matt, who barely ever talks to me, and here he is driving me to McDonald's playing car crash music. So that was pretty impactful, brother.
Well, yeah, I'm always looking forward to sharing my idiosyncratic world with others, and that was an opportunity for me. Let me put this classical music on these kids and see what they think of that.
So were you really into classical music when you were younger?
Yeah, well, it started when I was about 12. I think that's when I started taking piano lessons. And I still remember I asked for classical music for Christmas that year, and I got Beethoven's greatest hits, Bach's greatest hits, Mozart's greatest hits, and then Rachmaninoff's greatest hits. I was like, who the heck is Rachmaninoff? Like, I've heard of Beethoven, Bach, and Mozart, but to this day, Rachmaninoff's one of my all-time favorite composers. He's a Russian guy with massive hands who played the piano with these powerful chords. I mean, just lush, intense stuff. That was my beginnings in classical.
Yeah, Don knows exactly who you're talking about. I'm going to have to check him out. And I know that there's so much to talk about, Matt. You've got a really interesting life. And I hope you don't mind if I dive in to something that you briefly spoke about with me when I saw you a couple weeks ago. First time in years I saw you, and I wanted to know about your transition from being a Starbucks employee to becoming a therapist. Is that something you'd be willing to share with my friend Don and all the listeners?
Yeah, I'd love to. In fact, it's part of this larger narrative that I've recently been sort of putting together as part of a application to become a psychoanalyst, or to do training to become a psychoanalyst. So, psychoanalysis is sort of this extra thing that's a little different from just being a regular therapist. You have to do a lot more training, actually. Psychoanalysis is what Freud and Jung and all the original guys who created the whole field of psychology, it's what they practiced. And it involves seeing clients anywhere from 3 to 5 times a week for an hour each time. So it's a real intensive sort of thing, as opposed to nowadays, the typical is once a week, sometimes every other week, or even less, that you'll meet with a client. But so anyway, I just applied recently, and part of that is I had to write this autobiography in somewhat psychoanalytic terms of my life. And I really got into it. It's really interesting, and the whole story of Starbucks and how I went from being in Starbucks to a therapist is part of that. So I could just start from the beginning if you want.
Yeah, I'd like to know, because you were not at Starbucks for just a weekend. You were there for quite a long time, right?
Yeah, the same length of time it takes for a person to go from birth to adulthood, 18 years.
A lifetime.
In fact, it was the birth to adulthood of my daughter, basically. Right around the time she was born is when I started at Starbucks, and when she was becoming an adult is when I was wrapping up.
Yeah, so the story is just so fascinating. It gives me Tuesdays with Maury's vibe, and I'd like to just hand it over to you. Could you tell them the story that you told me of you? You're serving your coffee, and you overhear some gentleman, and you're captivated by the way he's speaking. Could you just go dive deep into that? Because I think it's a great story.
Sure. Yeah, so here I am, pretty new at Starbucks. For some context, my daughter was recently born. Also had a son who was 3 years older, and my marriage was kind of falling apart. So it was rough times. It was definitely the darkest hour of my life, looking back on it. Quite dark, because of just how bad it was getting in my marriage. And so I'm working at Starbucks, so I can make enough money and have insurance for the family. I'm on the bar making drinks. This older gentleman, about 70 years old, walks up to the cash register. There's a girl there, and there's another girl getting pastries. The girl turns around to do something, and this older gentleman kind of says, "Hey, what do we got to do to get service around here?" in this sort of powerful voice, but there was like a teasing quality to it, which she did not hear. She was terrified. She started like shaking, and he continued to sort of, try to express the teasing tone to her. And, she was she was just intimidated by him because he was so intense. He orders his drink, a grande vanilla latte, and goes and stands and waits, and I'm making drinks, and I'm like, this guy. I'm thinking to myself, this guy is really intense. Like he's giving me drill instructor vibes, like Marine Corps drill instructor. And he's looking at me, sizing me up and down. I can feel it. I'm like, man, this guy is intense. So I just sort of said to him, hey, man, what are you, like some ex-Marine or something? And he goes, what did he say? Former Marine, never an ex-Marine. Once a Marine, always a Marine. And I was like, oh, my God. I'm sorry that I spoke. But it was with such, like warmth and that sparkle. I mean, the sparkle in his eye. So on my break, I sat down next to him and started talking to him, and we hit it off instantly, and ended up in this relationship where I would sit down with him at the end of my shift. He was there every day. So at the end of my shift, I would sit down with him for 1 to 2 hours, sometimes longer, and we would just talk. And I'm only realizing now that it actually resembled a psychoanalysis, right? Like I said, psychoanalysis is 3 to 5 times a week for an hour each time, talking to a therapist. And it was more than that. It was at least 4 to 5 times a week, and it was 1 to 2 or more hours. The difference was that, we're in a public space, and it's not just talking about me, but other people are coming and going. But because of that, I get to see how he's interacting with a wide range of people. And I was just blown away by his assertiveness. Like, I'd never seen somebody who could handle the kind of situations that he was handling, the kind of people would have all kinds of reactions to him, and it would try to put him down. Hold on. Trying to find. So yeah, he just wouldn't receive it in the way that they wanted him to. And I kind of came to realize that at least part of what was going on was his refusal to collude with the kind of splitting that so many people do. And so when I say splitting, I mean the way that we just have this natural tendency to divide the world into good and bad, whether it's these are the good ideas, these are the bad ideas, these are the good behaviors and the bad ones, good people, bad people. And the implicit goal of doing that is that I want to stay on the right side of the line. I want to be in the good side. I don't want to be on the bad side. And then we get to project all of our guilt and hatred and shame about ourselves onto other people who are on the bad side of the line. And it's a really powerful intervention to see somebody who is able to accept the splitting and projections of others, kind of demonstrating a capacity to tolerate and even welcome all of it. People would say, "You're so arrogant," and he would say, "You have no idea." he would accept it with humor, he just wasn't put down by it, and that frustrated people. And it was all as if to say, we don't have to pretend. We can accept how we are. I can accept how I am. If I can, you can accept how you are. I can accept how you are. There's bad in all of us. Solzhenitsyn talked about this in the Gulag Archipelago. Where it's like the line between good and evil does not run between nations and states, between these people and those people. It runs between the heart of every man. And the best thing we can do is to kind of accept that, number one, rather than trying to split off from it and project the bad parts onto other people. That's really the source of a lot of true negativity. So, and speaking of that, so not only was he able to accept it coming from others, but he was able to give it. So this is the Marine mentality. You break people down in order to build them up. And he was like the Gordon Ramsay of psychology. If you ever watch Gordon Ramsay, some people don't like him because he can be pretty intense, and he's cussing and swearing and screaming and yelling and brutalizing people with his comments about the shit food that they're making. But if they're able to humbly accept, what he's telling them, he then helps them and transforms them into greatness. And although a lot of people can't do that, they just rebel against it and get upset, and nothing comes of that. But Richard, he did this, and he did this to me. He tried everything in his power to stir me up, slap me sideways, knock me down, and crack me open.
Can you give some examples?
Yeah, I'm coming to that.
All right.
Don't you fear thee not.
All right.
And this is because, for more context, at this point in my life, I was incredibly emotionally inhibited. And this goes all the way back to just my way of adapting to life that I developed early in life. And there's a dream that we can get into at some point that I had, a recurring dream from childhood that symbolizes that very well. So very emotionally inhibited. This was how I dealt with everything. I didn't know how to deal with emotions and relationships. So I had this presentation of, as if I wasn't affected emotionally by anything, by people, by emotions. And so he was cracking through that shell. So my highly developed capacity to remain seemingly unaffected by people and emotions took prolonged and heavy damage. So here's kind of a partial list of things that he said to me over the years, which I immortalized in my journal. I recently found this while I was putting together my autobiography. So he told me that I dress like a slob, that I'm a slug, that I sit in my own puddle, that I'm afraid to step out into the unknown and try something new. He said I'm not a fighter like he is, that I have no empathy. He said that I have nothing to offer to him, that I have no qualities that he desires. He said that I'm not humble, I'm not much of a man, that I'm uncreative, too logical, passive, benign. I avoid conflict, no direction. I have a weak ego. I'm emotionally needy. I'm not giving. I'm not a protector. I'm not dynamic. I'm boring. I'm not a challenge. But I don't fulfill myself. I'm not a gentleman. But I'm fragile. I'm not my own person, not a friend to myself. But I internalize my emotions. But I take things personally. And that I blame myself. And yeah, I felt that. I felt all of that. You didn't do it all at once. It just was like over the course of
Whoa.
This was over the course of a couple of years, but I was writing this shit down. Every time he would knock me on my ass like that, I felt it, and I would go and write about it.
What was your real-time reactions and feelings while you were getting that kind of information from this guy you highly respected?
I would usually be silent. That's my inhibited kind of response to feeling attacked. My typical response is actually a dual response. The primary one is to shut down, to feel disempowered, powerless, helpless, sorry for myself. But sometimes there's the opposite reaction, which is to get angry, to feel like this is unfair, this is wrong, this is pissing me off. And sometimes it's both. Sometimes I go back and forth between one and the other. I've had moments where these are better moments when I'm able to sort of feel like, for example, I was at work one time and I was getting criticized by a supervisor and my boss. And I felt sorry for myself, disempowered. And I was like, this sucks. I don't want to feel this way. Then I started feeling angry. Yeah, this is bullshit. And I'm like, no, this isn't. I don't want to take that route either. And then I went back to feeling disempowered. And I was like, I don't like this. Then I went back to feeling angry. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like trapped between these two hells. Like the hell on the left and the hell on the right. And then all of a sudden I kind of just snapped out of it. And I was present in the moment and no longer sucked into the either or of two negative extremes, just able to be with the circumstances as they were. And that's kind of the goal, is to really identify. So much of life is about this. There are two extremes, and then there's what I call the higher middle, or the kind of a higher synthesis, a way of being that threads the needle, that gets us out of the trap. And we often tend to get stuck on one side of the duality more than the other. For me, that was the passive side. I tended by far to choose the passivity more than the aggression. But within every person who's passive, you can bet that there's an equally great potential for anger and aggression, and vice versa. Someone who's aggressive is maybe rebelling against feeling like a victim and feeling impotent and passive. And it's, you want to get in touch with both of those so that you can then find your way out of the trap of all of that. I don't know how we got on that, but
was it something that your friend said, or did you just were you able to internalize it yourself and just figure out, okay, I'm gonna get through this on my own, and you just snapped out of it? Like, how did this happen so quickly, or just seemingly out of nowhere?
Yeah, that was a rare case. You know, that was a rare case where, yeah, I kind of found my way out through this awareness. You know, this is kind of a capacity to be with what I was feeling without getting drawn into it, without getting identified with it, nor disavowing it. So that's another two extremes. You know, when you're having an experience, you can either be identified with the experience, pushed around by it, and acting it out, or the feeling is acting through you. So the anger acting through you, fuck you, or, you know, screw you, or the passivity is acting through you, and you're just sort of shut down. So you're too close to it. The other extreme is to disavow it completely, you know, to throw it away into your unconscious, and then you're really just bland. And I mean, this is maybe more the passive side of things, but the higher middle in this case is a capacity to be with without being dominated by whatever experience you're having. It's holding the experience. You know, it's kind of like getting close enough to a fire to be warmed by it, but not burned by it on the one hand, nor out in the cold on the other. And it takes something. It's a balance act. And this is a lot of what I talk about with a lot of my clients as a therapist. You know, like how to be with their experience in a way that's going to be useful to them. Because some people get overwhelmed by their experience, and so they need to develop some capacity for detachment. And other people, like me, more tend to, you know, be overly detached and dissociated, and, you know, and all of that. And they need to be encouraged that they can feel their feelings, have them. Feelings like fire are a good servant but a poor master. You know, when they take over, they cause problems. But when you're having them rather than them having you, that's the proper.
So going back to these conversations, when he's telling you all this, is this just coming up in general conversation? Is he coming there to rip you down so he can lift you up? But like, how is this happening? And if you guys are talking for an hour or two every single day, is this just coming up generally? Are you asking him how he feels about you? Like, how is this happening?
Yeah, I was not asking. I learned quick not to do that. He was good at knocking me on my ass unpredictably. I don't know that there was any sort of pattern that I could come up with, because I was good at looking for these patterns, and because I'm good at avoiding things, you know, like from a young age, you know, I felt like a hunted animal with respect to people and emotions, an animal that sort of knows how to sense the presence of danger from miles away. So you'll never see that animal if you're walking in the woods. You know, they hear you and see you way before you ever see them, and they're gone. You know, and so I knew how to go get around situations before anyone even knew that I was avoiding it.
Oh, why do you think that is?
It was protective. It was, you know, I was so threatened by closeness and intimacy. At the same time, I deeply wanted it. It's this incredible paradox. You deeply want the thing that let's say that you have felt like you never got, and but then you get used to not having it.
Wow.
And you start to become comfortable with not having it, and then the thing that you really, really need, that you really, really want, starts to become a thing that you also really, really fear, because now it's an unknown thing. It's a thing that promises to transform you beyond who you identify yourself as, because you start to identify it as this thing that doesn't get it. And it's just a profound paradox inside the soul that a lot of people with, you know, mental health issues wrestle with, in one version of this or another. inner conflict.
Matt, can I tell you why this is really special to me, this conversation? Because, Don, I don't know if you probably do. I'm guessing most people do, where you have these relationships when you're young. And as you grow up, if you see these people that you had relationships with when you were young, you see them exactly as you did when you were a kid, as opposed to like kind of anybody else you meet on the street. They're a brand new person, a brand new character. But for me, you know, I'm this annoying kid. Most of the older kids, even one of Matt's younger brothers, like there's a whole host of kids in the neighborhood who didn't really like me. I was annoying. I mean, I had kids beating me up regularly. My next door neighbor's big brother, and then there was always this guy Matt, kind of in the background of my life, who I always just thought of as being above everybody. This guy who's kind of got things figured out for whatever reason, Matt, just because of the way you spoke, the way you were more intelligent than everybody. You seemed wiser than everyone. This is from my perspective. I was going to your piano concerts and you were like the semi-main event of the whole thing, and you were incredible. And I just always saw you as this kind of like higher leveled kid, this kid that I just kind of thought was beyond someone I could talk to just because I was beneath you. And so it's hard for me it's hard for me to break out of that notion of who you are. And so when I hear of, you know, even when you were in Starbucks, I always thought, oh, you know, Matt's got it figured out. That's what he wants to do. This is his life. He's happy. And so to hear these things and to hear that you were going through these internal struggles is like, it's obvious to me you're human, and that's obviously a human way to be. But to me, you've always just been this wiser person who doesn't have to struggle with these kind of things. So it's so fascinating to me to hear that you were struggling for many of the years that I knew you. And I really appreciate you being open and honest about all these things you went through and how this guy really broke you down.
Yeah, you know, that everything is ambivalent. Everything has, you know, positive and negative valence to it. So this experience that you had of me as, you know, this wiser, older person that had things figured out, you know, while there may be some truth to that, there's also truth to, you know, what was going on. A lot of what was going on is, you know, a bit of that is an act, right, on my part, which is keeping me aloof and disconnected. Like, it preserves, by putting out that persona, I'm preserving my aloneness, you know, which I'm comfortable with. You know, it's somewhat foreclosing on an invitation to relationship, because people might experience me that way. Some people experience me as aloof, but other people like you experience me in a positive way, which is great. You know, I love that.
Totally.
But it's both. It's a both and, you know, like these things are happening at the same time.
Right.
You know,
and Richard is somebody who used that ambivalence in a different way. He's like, I'm going to be an asshole for people. So you can experience me as an asshole, or you can experience that for you. It's intended for you, and it's ambivalent.
Right.
I'm just, you know, I'm thinking a little bit about, like, I've had friends in my life who I don't want to say necessarily masked their emotions while they were younger, but they always set themselves up with, I don't know, a persona that seemed distant in some ways. And I'm curious to see if was there something that you did where you were younger where you felt most like your whole self?
There's something that I did when I was younger where I felt most like...
Yeah, like instead of feeling like, you know, this pull between looking for you know, sort of like a more intimate relationships and being also afraid of that, was there any activities or anything that you did where you felt most like this is just who I am?
Yeah. I think for me that was when I was in nature.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of my childhood walking around the woods behind my house. This was the house before the house I lived in when I knew Sam. But I walked around that woods too. But especially when I was younger, I walked around the woods, There was a lake at the end of the street that I would walk around, and here was a world that was not threatening the way the social and emotional realms of the human realm was. So I could just go into my mind, into presence, with the external world and the internal world. And, I think that was very helpful for me. And also ambivalent too, because it also served to help me avoid, the human and the emotional realms.
I hope you don't
But,
mind me asking this. I do want to get back to your decision to become a therapist and how those last meetings with your friend went. But I do, if you don't mind me asking, Matt, I'm more than curious. I really would like to know, because I know your family's one of my favorite families in the entire world. I love your family, and I loved going to your house more than I loved going to my own house. I spent most of my childhood there and in those woods you speak of. Was it because were you picked on in school? Like, I know your brothers didn't give you a hard time. Like, can you point to something that had you going through these emotional turmoils?
Well, this depends on who we want to hear this podcast. But I can say that it relates to the dream that I had, that I referred to earlier. I had a recurring dream in early childhood of being in my elementary school and running because a monster is chasing us. All the other kids are in front of me, of course. I'm the last one, and so it's right on my heels. And I managed to make it outside. I cross the blacktop, and I find a cement mixer truck, and I climb into the back of this, the drum of the cement mixer through the hole, and I peek out through the hole, and I see the kids running around. I never see the monster, but that seems to capture symbolically my experience as a kid. I was afraid of the emotional world. I was afraid of the external world, and I can't say that there was any, there wasn't any obvious trauma that that created that. There are in a family there are sometimes mismatches of kind of personality style that can lead to a child having an experience that's very difficult. Essentially, I was unable to experience, even though I know my parents loved me, I struggled to experience that. And I'm not sure why, because as an adult, it's clear that they do, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So, maybe something happened before I had a memory. I don't know. I don't imagine it was anything.
But a lot of this, man,
super traumatic. But
yeah, but so a lot of this was just your own internal thoughts, just I guess working against you to some degree.
Yeah. So I learned to favor the desert, so to speak, of isolation.
Do you think that all those thoughts and the struggles you went through help you through your profession now and help you relate or help you, you relate?
Absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't be who I was if it wasn't for all of that.
Yeah.
Like, if you have an uncomplicated experience of life, you have little motivation to really reach for the depths and the heights of understanding. And, as a therapist, I seek to heal what I've suffered. So the terrain that I have navigated myself is what I have to offer in guiding of other people. So the more I've experienced, walked, and moved through on my own, it's natural to help others with that.
I was telling Don before this podcast started, I was saying, if I did have a therapist and I didn't know him, I'd want it to be a Matt, a guy who's been through his own stuff and has gotten himself through it, and also just has the best heart. is very wise, very intelligent, and just someone you would want on your side. You'd feel comfortable speaking with. Like, you are that guy, and I think therapy. I mean, if I've in the past I've found therapists, and a couple have been great, a couple have been ones I can't connect with, and man, I'd always be looking for a guy like Matt out there. I just think you are perfect for this role, and I'm sure whoever you're speaking with, they've got to feel the same way, because you're just that guy. You're that guy that someone would want to speak to, feel comfortable with, and someone who truly cares and want to help improve. It's probably not just a job to you, right? It's more than that.
Oh no, this is absolutely my passion. Yeah, I'm so lucky to be one of those people for whom work is play.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a big secret to life, I think, is to transform work into play whenever you can. Sometimes work is work. Sometimes you have to do stuff you don't want to do. But, to the extent that you can, it's good to transform work into play. Play is not childish. It can be childlike. And there's also serious play. It's not all, fun and games play. But play is a state of mind where you have full access to your psychic capacity. When you're really stressed and concentrated, like, I got to figure this out, you don't have your full creative capacity at hand. You're too stressed for that. And then on the other side of the coin, when you're bored, you're not operating at your peak. Play is a peak experience. It's a union of opposites, to speak of higher middles again. On the one side, you've got, anxiety and stress. On the other side, you've got maybe depression, maybe a feeling of what's the point? Everything's meaningless. Why would I do anything? And play kind of straddles that. It's like, it is just a game, this life, this thing I'm up to. I'm relating to it as a game, and there is no, like, I don't know, there might, maybe there isn't any like super meaning to it, but I'm very interested and I want to do a good job, because you do when you're playing a game. Like, yeah, it is just a game, but I'm in it.
You got to win.
Yeah. I mean, some people relate to games as with anxiety, but ideally, play is that middle space, the higher middle, where you're really just engaged and enjoying yourself in the moment, doing whatever it is that you do. And for me, being a therapist is that. And conversations like this, right? This is absolutely play for me, and I can sense that podcasting is play for you guys as well, which is probably why you're doing it.
It's not for the money. We're not doing it for the money. That is for sure.
Wait, there's no money? Wait a second.
You want a commercial, Matt? So, did you want to say something, dude?
No, I agree with that. I also relate with that, with the anxiety and the depression, and find some play in the middle. That mean, wow, that sums up just about every day. But yeah, I agree with that, and I also I've also experienced that in a bunch of different ways, like where sometimes you just need to step away from something, or the more I think the more enjoyment that I have, and usually that comes in the form of some sort of social interaction. Like, the more I enjoy the conversation or the riffing on an idea, the more jazzed I am, the more creative I feel that I can contribute to a project.
Yeah, it is like jazz, like improvisation. That's what's fun in life, right? Not when you have something figured out and laid out and obsessed over. It takes the life out of it.
It's kind of like this podcast, right? I asked you ahead of time, do you want to know the questions? And you said, no, let's just improvise it.
Exactly. Yeah,
I
exactly.
love that. Yeah.
So let's go back. Let's go ahead and get to the conclusion of that chapter in your life. You are meeting with this guy. He is just ripping into you, but he's clearly doing it with a loving heart, which makes all the difference. It's like when I have to give a camper a discipline because he's done something terrible, and before you know it, even though I've had to break him down a little, 99% of the time, that same kid, once they're behaving well, come up to me and wants to tell me about all the success they've had in dodgeball that day, and they like me just that much more because I did it, but I did it with love, you know. So that's what you're going through with this guy. Tell me, how does it conclude? How did you become a therapist through all this?
Yeah, so he gave me the help that I needed to kind of face and make sense of my emotional world and what was going on with me. And like I said, we seek to heal what we've suffered. So having starting to gain some mastery, so to speak, of these things, you want to share it. And it was also in line with, I was already interested in psychology, philosophy, spirituality, these sorts of things before I met Richard. And he helped me to consolidate my interest in psychology specifically because I was a philosophy major and I had spent time studying Buddhism quite a lot. And I ended up realizing that both of those things were facilitating my isolation. Being real philosophical, you can get in your head, and a lot of philosophers do. Not all of them, but you don't have to, but it was certainly how I was using it. And then similar with Buddhism and meditation, I was trying to empty my mind, clear my mind, and I still remember I was meditating every day for 40 minutes a day at the Missouri Zen Center at the same time that everything was happening with my marriage and the same time that I met Richard. And so as my marriage is falling apart, I go to the abbot at the Zen Center and I tell him, like, hey, when I'm meditating lately, these powerful feelings of anger and sadness and hurt are starting to like well up inside of me. As soon as I kind of start to clear my mind, what do I do with them? And this guy, he says, well, meditation is about clearing the mind and recharging your batteries so you can go back out into the world with a clear mind. And that just wasn't helpful. It was almost as if saying, yeah, just, I don't know, suppress it or ignore it or clear it away.
Just stuff it down.
Yeah. Be a man.
Be a man. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, right. And thank God, because again, this was my darkest hour. And they say the darkest hour comes before the dawn, because that's when I met Richard. And, he just, he would make fun of Buddhism. He called it the ostrich syndrome. He would go, Om, stick your head in the sand, Matt. Om, pretend like everything's fine. Om, everything's okay. And it drove me, it really angered me, but that was how, and that's not actually what Buddhism is about, but it is how I was using it.
Mm-hmm.
And so his path was definitely the path for me, the path of understanding your emotions, working with them. And so, yeah, of course I want to share that. Of course I want to go that direction, and I'm loving it every second of it.
What was the moment? Were you sitting with him? Was it after you concluded these lunch break meetings with him? When did you decide, like, maybe this is the path I should take?
I can point to a moment, and it was a moment that happened after Richard had moved away. He actually moved to Gig Harbor, Washington, a place that he had lived before I met him, with his wife, kind of thus ending the daily interactions that I had with him. And I'm working at Starbucks one morning, and this customer who comes in regularly at the very early mornings, Mark Friss. He's a doctor who splits his time between here in St. Louis and teaching at the medical university in Nashville. It's a famous one. Anyway, he said, hey, so you've been working here for a while? Yeah. At that point it was like 14 years or something. What do you want to do with your life? What are you up to? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, well, what are you interested in? I'm like, well, psychology. He's like, psychology? Huh. Well, why don't you ever thought of taking a class at a community college, just kind of, get your head in the game, see what it's like? And I was like, huh. an interesting idea. I was still struggling to think for myself, right? I need people around me to help me like that. And so I did. I took this class for word psychoanalysis at the local community college. It was led by Dr. Terry Cooper, who picked me and a handful of students to form a private group that met once a week called the Wounded Healers. And then it was that group of people that encouraged me to go into a graduate program to get licensed to be a therapist. They said, Matt, you really should do this. You would be a great therapist. And I was like, really? Me? I needed that encouragement.
Yeah.
Like, I was just not used to that in life. So I did. I mean, every step of the way, like it's relationships with people, not my isolation, that has really benefited me the most.
I know Richard passed away. Was he alive long enough to know about this path you went on?
Yes. I called him up and asked if he could be one of my references for my application to graduate school. And he said he would. But it was a weird, very complicated process to become to do it, and he couldn't figure it out. And he was having some struggles at that point in time, health struggles. So he ended up not actually being one of those people for me, but it was fine. I didn't need it.
Yeah.
So he knew.
One of the reasons I love this story so much is because I have quite a few friends. In fact, you might know one of them who, through their whole life, they kind of say that they want to do this or they should have done that. And I'm always pressing people like, you got to just start doing something. And the fact that you went from, I'm sure you were great at Starbucks, but I also think your talents were probably not being utilized as well as they could have. And in middle age, you went on and discovered your real path, your real career, your real passion in life. I think it's really motivating and awesome that this has happened to you, and it didn't happen to you in your 20s. It happened to you later, and it definitely gives hope that even if someone is stuck doing what they don't want to do, there's still so much opportunity out there.
That's very true. It reminds me of something that Dr. Terry Cooper of the Wounded Healers told me. He said, Matt, you've got higher kites to fly. Really? Higher kites than Starbucks? Yeah, man.
So how was it starting off the career? How was it working with those first few clients? Did you have the imposter syndrome? Did you dive in just knowing you're ready to go?
No. It was major imposter syndrome. In fact, I almost didn't graduate because part of me knew, okay, this is a major transition. It was a total identity shift from 18 years of, being a barista, which I enjoyed it. I took pride in it, and I think I was good, and I loved connecting with customers, but a major identity shift. And actually a lot of things happened that year. That was the year I became an empty nester. So there's another big transition. Both my daughter, my youngest, went off to college. I had ended a 3.5-4 year relationship that year. And I was ending this 18-year relationship with Starbucks and transitioning to, a totally different career. So it was so stressful. I've got pictures of myself, and I look so depressed in these pictures. It was confronting me at the deepest possible level. I had some assignments that I had to do in order to complete some classes that were still incomplete. I just had to complete the assignments, turn them in, get a grade, and graduate. And months went by, months where I was unable to do these assignments. These were not the most difficult assignments in the world. And I would watch myself moving towards my computer to open it up and work on the assignments. And I would just watch myself go to the bathroom. Okay, fine, you have to go to the bathroom. Then I would come back towards the computer. Then I'd watch myself go towards the kitchen. I just need a snack. I need a nap. I can take a nap. I would just distract. I'm just going to check in on Facebook real quick. I'm just going to roll a video here. Oh, this looks interesting. Next thing I know, oops, my window for doing something is gone. Now it's time to go to work, or it's time to go to bed, or time to go somewhere else. And this would happen over and over and over and over again. So something deep. This is a sign that the unconscious is at play. Like something's going on that's sort of manipulating me outside of my conscious capacity to do anything about. I was involved with, at that time, an organization called Landmark. And I got some really powerful coaching from a coach that really helped me to blast through some of my resistance and get these assignments done and graduate. And thank God for that. So Landmark's another connection to people that have really helped me. They're very powerful. They're very dynamic. And then, of course, when I started, I also continued to have some imposter syndrome that was terrifying. But pretty soon, I remember as I'm driving home from work, about a couple weeks into being a therapist, I'm just like pumping my fist in the air, and I'm just like, "Fuck yeah!" Because it was
no
just
shit.
it was so exciting to be. This is my job now. I get to have these kinds of conversations with people. These deep, meaningful conversations where I feel like I'm really using, and giving something of value at the deepest level that I feel I'm capable of.
Yes.
Yeah, just incredible.
Was that a moment where the imposter syndrome started to the wall was chipped down, or just driving your car, rocking out to the thought of you're doing it?
Yeah, I'd say it took a good 6 months before it kind of really took a backseat. But it was gradually sort of getting better and better. It wasn't so bad. But man, the fear in your gut also kind of keeps you alive too. There's fear and excitement go hand in hand. So
yeah,
I've gotten back in touch with that recently. I've reactivated some of that fear, and I can relate to it more powerfully, more directly. I'm not as afraid of my fear.
Hell yeah! And
I have it.
Through the last 3 years, have you found success with your clients?
Okay, so that's another interesting thing. Yes, and no, and like yes and no. So recently I've kind of been feeling a little depressed about sort of the early excitement of being a therapist has worn off, and it's like, oh man, like I've been seeing some of these people for 2-3 years, and it's not obvious that they're like a lot better. First, when you think back to the first session, like, okay, they're definitely better than that, but they're still really stuck. Like it's like you quickly plateau, and then there's just a long period where you're just sort of working through whatever there is to work through, and you realize, oh, this isn't as, maybe I'm not as effective as I thought I was. You're having all these big insights at the early part of your career with clients, and you think it's going to transform them, and in some ways it does, but in a lot of ways, they're kind of still the same, and I still have a lot of my same issues that I've always had. So it's kind of humbling. And
is it disheartening at all?
Can be. I haven't been getting into that part of it so much lately, but there were a few times where I felt disheartened.
I'd imagine that, like, regardless of how much help you get, it's like you still carry a lot of what you've experienced through life with you, even after you get the help you need. Somebody helping you carry a 50-pound weight, it's still 50 pounds. It feels a little lighter to you. So I'd imagine that, while they're still carrying this stuff, it doesn't necessarily need to be that they've they've conquered it as much as they've learned, how to live with it.
Yeah, yeah. You expand yourself. You develop new ways of being. You don't lose the old ways of being, and they're still there. And maybe you could think of it as I've got a few more gears that I can shift into,
Mm-hmm.
but and you start to learn that there's actually a value to all of the gears, even anger and depression have value when you know how to relate to them.
Yeah.
There are things we can learn from them.
So let's talk future. You're going to be taking new courses. You're going to up your game. Is this a result of you feeling like you're getting it's the honeymoon phase is over? You're deep into that world now, and the excitement isn't there as much. Is that why you decided to up your game, or is it just because you're still in love with the profession and you want to do better? What made you decide to continue your education, doing more?
Well, yeah. So this kind of relates to something that I discovered in my graduate program. So at first, my graduate program was very exciting, but by the end, I kind of increasingly felt out of place and unwanted because they had a tendency to focus on things like CBT and social justice, which kind of went against everything I'd learned from Richard. So I was used to addressing things at a depth which cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT seemed to ignore. They're focusing more on what's illogical about your way of thinking here. They're including emotions more nowadays, but still, it didn't seem to go to the depth that I was used to. And much of, not all of, but much of the social justice movement seemed to foster the kind of splitting that I was trying to move away from and kind of heal within myself. These are the good guys, these are the bad guys, and don't be a bad guy. So, where was I going with all that? What was the question again?
The question was, why did you decide?
Oh, yeah. Why did I decide to go in the direction of studying psychoanalysis intensely?
Yes.
So it was at the end of my time at my graduate program that I had to do an internship, and I did it at the local psychoanalytic institute. And it was like going from feeling like an ugly duckling to feeling like a swan. Like, oh my gosh, these people think like me. They don't devalue my intellectualizing. They say, no, there's value to this. Yes, it can be used to avoid emotions, but we can also make use of it. There's a deep tradition of utilizing insight and emotion hand in hand. So basically, that's when I decided that I was going to go in the direction of psychoanalysis. Well, I didn't decide then, but kind of gradually.
Yeah.
I took some training with them. I did a 2-year training program with them, and in addition to the internship, and then started doing my own psychoanalysis with a psychoanalyst, and was like, all right, I'm all in. I love this. This is absolutely the field of psychoanalysis is like an ocean by comparison to the pond of what seems like the pond of CBT. I'm devaluing it a bit here, but it's obviously that I'm never going to exhaust the embarrassment of riches that psychoanalysis has to offer in terms of what there is to study and read and absorb. And I love that. I love this idea of swimming in this ocean and just soaking up as much as I can, maybe contributing to it in some way.
Yeah, I love that too. And we're coming up on an hour. I do have a few more questions. Hopefully I can rattle off to you quick, and maybe Don does as well. The first question is, do you get to be creative in your profession, or do you find yourself going by the book and doing, strictly what you've been taught in
well, that's another thing I love about psychoanalysis is it's a frustrating thing for new therapists because they don't tell you what to do. They just don't. It's like, well, what do I do? What do I tell the patient, or what do I do? And they're like, no, we don't tell you what to do. We just tell you here's a way of understanding what's going on. This is one way, and there's many ways within psychoanalysis to understand what's going on with people. Just become familiar with as much as you can. Try to deepen your understanding of what it is to be a human being. And from that deep understanding, we trust that you will interact with your client in a way that will be useful to them. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, I love that because it facilitates this creative exploration. It's like I can improvise like I'm doing with you guys today. I can go into a room. I don't have, like, there's a famous psychoanalyst, Wilfred Bion. He said, try to enter the room without memory or desire. Don't come in trying to remember everything about the patient. I need to remember, oh yeah, that's right, when he was 5 years old this happened, and
Yeah.
And without desire. Don't go in like, oh, here's what I'm going to do today, we're going to work on blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Like, no, get rid of all of that. Be with your client as they're showing up right now, today. Whatever was happening last week, forget about it. Be with them right now and just work with what's showing up. And I just love that.
I love that too, and I'm sure your clients would love that as well. Because I know personally when I went to this one therapist when I was much younger, and I remember feeling like he was going by the book. And as soon as that happened, I checked out. I really did. I was just like, oh, we got to do this again. But I got two more. I'm going to rattle them off to you real quick. The first one, I'll start off with this one. A couple of years ago, you reached out to me and you said, hey, Sam, I'd like to catch up. I want to talk. We never talked that much through the years. I'm just curious, man. What made you decide to reach out to me like that?
Oh, that was me I was wanting to talk to you about Landmark. At the time, I was doing a Landmark program and wanted to share it with you, and thought maybe you'd be interested because you definitely have that very powerful presence and life force that.
Don is shaking his head no. Thank you, though, man. That means a lot coming from you. Didn't know I came across that way to you, brother. That means a lot. And
are you kidding me? Do you hear yourself?
Maybe not.
You're very alive, and that's one of the best things about you.
Oh, well, I feel I needed to hear that. Thank you, brother. And my final question for you is, if Richard were to know how far you've come, what you're doing, and what you're striving to do next, what do you think he would have to say? Would he still be kicking your ass, or would he tell you did it, or what would Richard say? What do you think?
Both and, for sure. He would give me a lot of love, and he would probably find something to kick my ass about.
Yeah. Little yin and yang. I love it.
Absolutely.
Don, anything else, brother?
So, just for you to fill the role of a therapist, maybe for all of our listeners here for just a second. Artists in general usually feel things in a way that's not always the most productive in ways. I think they're often afraid to share their work, sometimes afraid to take a compliment, afraid to succeed. Where do you think a lot of that comes from, and what do you think would be ways that, like, I don't know how they move past it, because I've known a lot of people who have moved past it or finally said, fuck it, and just went for it. But there's also a lot of people that I know that are still trapped in that space.
Yeah, it's tough to get out of. I just know for me, it required my own Mr. Miyagi, which was Richard. I always was drawn to Mr. Miyagi and the Karate Kid, the mentor of Daniel-san.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, relationships. I think there's something about relationships. Again, at least for me, this was a big part of my way out, because I was, especially for people who, are very introverted, retreat within themselves. um, the we are harmed by relationships, but it's good to know that we also healed by relationships. And when you've been harmed by relationships in some way, you feel like you've been, it can cause you to avoid anything that risks relational, pain. So, but what we need is to become good at picking our relationships.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
looking for somebody good. So finding a good therapist can be a really good way forward. Finding a good partner, finding good friends.
It's like
Um,
look for the helpers. The
Yeah,
the old
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
yeah,
There's always people
yeah.
who want to help.
The people that will be genuinely encouraging, not reassuring. Reassurance. Watch out, too much reassurance. That tends to collude with the sort of splitting that I'm worried about. Like, oh, you're good. No, you're good. You're all good. We don't feel genuinely reassured by that.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, you're just saying it. But when somebody's able to say, you're a fucking slug, man. You're a slug. You're a slob. You don't take care of yourself. But you can tell that they're doing it, like, then when they give you a compliment, you take it because, they don't speak, in that sort of way that's just false.
Yeah.
I love that. Hey, I gotta say, Matt, like I really appreciate this, and 10-year-old Sam is just beaming with joy knowing that Matt thinks that I'm alive and I'm I'm that guy, and that means a lot to me, man. And is there anything else I gotta drop a shout out, because I know he'll be listening? Eric, my best friend in the whole world, I love you to death, brother. Thank you for always being there for me and being the best friend I could ask for, and giving me another cool family. Your family is just very, very special to me. So I got to say that to Eric. Matt, is there anything else you want to drop on us before we get out of here?
I want to say, Don, I'm sorry I didn't get to talk to you more today, but I appreciate especially that final question. It was a really good one. I want to make a shout out to Brandon. Brandon is a fellow therapist where I work who is also a Marine. So I'm sort of finding these Marine therapists in my life, and I connect. For some reason, I really connect with them. They balance me. They balance my passivity. And I want to say thank you. Thank you, Sam, for inviting me.
Anytime, brother.
And for who you are. For who you are. Yeah.
Likewise, brother. Big time. Big time. I'm a big fan. Matt, you're the man, and I really enjoyed this, brother.
Thank you, Sam.
Pleasure talking with you, Matt.
Later, dude.
Yeah.
And later to all of you people. It was great talking with Don again. Missed you, brother.
Yeah, missed you too, man.
All right. We are out.